Ms. Bradford.
No, I oppose the ruling of the chair.
Mr. Weiler. Was I wrong?
No, that's correct. I want to oppose the ruling.
Ms. Killid. No. Ms. Shanahan.
No.
Ms. Yip.
No.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Mr. Brock.
Yes.
Mr. Barrett.
Yay.
Madame Sinclair-Designy.
Oui.
Mr. Descharlet.
Yes.
Thank you. Beginning our third round, Mr. Nader, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Sorry, point of order. Sorry,
Yes.
my colleague. I apologize to my colleague. Just in terms of the time operation now, is it possible? Will our time be recovered, or will the last round of our questions be eliminated?
It is my intention, Mr. Descharlet, to recover your time. We are beginning the third round. I plan to do 3 and 4, so you will have 2 more slots subject to the willingness of the committee. Okay?
Very good.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Nader, you have 5.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to you for ensuring that members get their time despite the obvious obstructionary tactics by the Liberal National Caucus Chair. But nonetheless, thank you, Chair, and through you, thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Bashir, Mr. Utano suggested to you or indicated to you to submit 2 proposals, one through GC Strategies and one directly to CBSA. Is that correct? Am I interpreting that correctly?
Thank you for the question. Just a small clarification. It was the same proposal. So we initially was requested to submit it to Mr. Utano, which we did. Subsequently met with Mr. Utano to discuss the details of it. And it was at that subsequent meeting where he said, I'd like you to send a copy of this to Mr. Firth at GC Strategies.
So it was the exact same proposal for the exact same amounts in both submissions?
That's correct. It was the same. It was a PowerPoint presentation, to be specific, but it was the exact same presentation. Yes.
Could you remind the committee what was the dollar figure attached to that submission?
Thank you for the question. I recall it was 2 separate. So it's going to be a little long-winded, but I apologize. It was originally going to be 2 separate task authorizations. The first being more of a technical control review. That was in the amount of $255,000. And the second half, the second task authorization was more procedural in nature, reviewing policies, procedures of the sort, and that was for $145,000 for a grand total of $400,000.
And did you in fact receive $400,000 from GC Strategies for your work?
From GC Strategies, yes, that is correct.
And you would have expected to receive a similar amount or the exact same amount had you dealt directly with the CBSA?
That is correct.
So by going through GC Strategies, you still got paid the same amount, but taxpayers in the great scheme of things paid more. Is that a good assumption?
That is my understanding of what happened, yes.
Okay. You talked about meeting with Mr. Firth 2 to 3 times while you were at the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat as a senior government official, as a Director General. But you made the comment that they were like any other vendor. In response to another question, you said that there was an element of understanding where the industry was heading. My question to you, though, is were you aware that GC Strategies actually doesn't do any IT work? Were you aware of that at the time?
Thanks for the question. I did not know the nature of GC Strategies business, in great depth. What I did know about them, and to give Mr. Firth credit, he thoroughly read a recent IT strategy we had posted in 2017, 2018, and responded or sent an email, which obviously I had a public email address at the time, sent an email saying that he had some suggestions on how I might be able to achieve some of those strategic objectives. And so I didn't do any research in the company. I took the meeting as I would of any other vendor who would come up with a good idea to investigate further.
So he flim-flammed you. He made you. He flim-flammed you. He made you think that they were a reputable IT company when really they were 2 guys who were operating a business. He was able to write you a nice email, compliment you on some strategies, and convince you that they were actually a reputable company like any other when really they weren't. Is that a good assumption?
Yeah, I don't know the term that you use there, but what I would suggest is he brought 2 valid products to the table. two one was secure communications, as I mentioned. One was digital identity. When I looked up those products, they're legitimate products that he had aligned himself with. So, kudos to him for finding the right products out there.
I guess kudos for him for pulling the wool over a lot of people's eyes over a number of years and making himself quite wealthy off of it. But I want to go briefly to the risk management process that you spoke of within KPMG. Are there two questions? First of all, are there records of that process, and would you be willing to share that information with this committee? That's the first question.
Thank you for the question. We have records of all of these processes, and I'll take that back to the team to see what can be shared.
Okay, I look forward to hopefully seeing that. Second is, what information did you provide to that process within KPMG of your past interactions with GC Strategies? Were they aware that you had personally met with them on at least 2, maybe 3 occasions as a senior official with the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat?
Thanks for the question. I don't recall that being one of the fields that I talked about earlier that had to be filled out regarding personal meetings with the organization. The process is more about testing the legitimacy of the organization. It's I think we look for any public knowledge of lawsuits or things of that nature, and nothing came up at that time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nader. Up next is Ms. Yip. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be asking each one of the companies the next 2 questions. Were either of your companies involved in creating the terms of contracts you were awarded? Mr. Bashir?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay. No? And okay. Were security clearances a prerequisite to receiving a contract to work on ArriveCan? Were they acquired before the work began? Mr. Bashir?
Thanks for clarifying, and thank you for the question. So in my particular case, security clearances were certainly a requirement given the security nature of the work we were performing. And I can assure you that every member of my team had the requisite security clearance based on the role they had. And to clarify that statement is that those that were issued, a couple of members of my team were required to have in-depth access, as you can imagine, to CBSA systems, and they required secret clearances, and other members of my team required reliability clearances. But all folks involved had the requisite clearance, yes.
Yes, we had the appropriate corporate security clearance as well as our consultants. We have a team that is responsible for making sure that's all in place on any contract. So yes, we had all the security clearances.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We review all our fees and contracts and to validate that we meet the security requirements, and we met the security requirements for our CBSA contracts.
And that was acquired before the work began. Is that right?
Thank you for the question. We hold a security clearance as a company, and we validate the security clearance of the individuals that we place with the Government of Canada.
Okay. Mr. Bashir, have you ever met Darren Anthony?
Thank you for the question. No, I've never met Mr. Anthony.
Okay. Mr. Bernard and Mr. Dodwell, I'm sorry. Did you have any meetings related to ArriveCan with officials outside of a normal office setting? Have you, was KPMG involved in conversations around developing the non-competitive contract between GC Strategies and CBSA? Have you spoken to anyone else looking into this issue, like the Auditor General?
Me personally, no, I have not. I don't know, Lydia.
If I can clarify thank you for the member's question. So the Auditor General did contact KPMG to confirm the information that was about to go out in the report ahead of time, just before the report was released, to confirm the details, and we complied with her request.
Mr. Bashir, in your opening statement, you mentioned that KMP serves and assists clients with respect to gaps. And do you feel that that was done? In your,
Thank you for
in your,
if I understand the question correctly, I believe you might have been referring to my statement about closing strategic and operational gaps. Was that the
yes, that's,
reference?
I couldn't remember the
No
exact
problem.
wording, but I wanted to hear more about that with respect to the work that you were contracted to do.
Absolutely, thank you. And through the chair, I'll answer that in that, you know, specifically in my field of cybersecurity, a lot of our work ends up being gap analysis type work, which means, you know, assessing security posture of systems, you know, today, assessing where they need to be, and providing roadmaps on how to get to a state to best protect the information that is being held by the organization. So by closing operational gaps, that's the reference, certainly in respect to the engagement that I worked on. But I'll pass it to Ms. Lee if there's anything that you want to add for yours.
Just as I had said before, the last time we were here, the work that we did on the Public Health Agency ArriveCAN program was really on helping the Public Health Agency understand policy directions that they might need to take or change or evolve with the COVID-19 pandemic. And we reached out to our global colleagues to provide global leading practices on what other 5I or other jurisdictions were doing in order to help inform those policy directions. So that was the nature of the type of support that we were providing.
That is your time, Ms. Yip. Yes, thank you very much. Up next is Madame Sinclair Desgagnés pour 2 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Bashir, now that you've read the Auditor General's report and you've heard the various testimonies, and you know that Mr. Firth is under investigation by the RCMP, and now that if you had known all that, would you have proceeded with your work with him?
Thanks for the question. I think the first thing to state is we had CBSA asking us to help them augment the security of a system that stored personal information for Canadians, and that is squarely in our wheelhouse, and I'm proud to have done that work and would do that particular work again for any government agency. With respect to the question about GC strategies, and as I stated earlier, today, as we go through, if we were to go through that risk management process again, I would strongly suspect that flags would be raised and we would not proceed with the engagement through GC strategies. But I don't want to take away from the fact that the work itself, we still believe, and I'm proud to say, was useful.
Merci. C'est pas l'objet de la question.
Thank you. But personally, you, what you find unusual or the red flags that might have been raised, and now that you're aware of you know what you know now, what do you find as being not ethical in what you did, and could you not have done more with regard to ethics if you had known what you know now?
Thank you for the question. When it comes to procurement, we have to follow the direction of the agency that is conducting the procurement. And so, which is what we did at the time, and which is what we would do going forward, and rely on our processes afterwards to dictate whether or not it is acceptable for our firm to go forward with the work.
À vous entendre, on dirait que les
when I listen to you, I would think that the partners and the those involved, they are not able to see black and white based on what they have in the system. But I so assume that if you're a partner at KPMG, you have the duty and also the ability to defend your approach, and when you have different information or different ways of acting. And if you see a danger, a risk, a professional risk for KPMG, you would have preferred not to be here today, of course. But would you have proceeded differently? But you, as an individual who is supposed to be intelligent, are you capable of doing this now?
Thank you for the member's question. I think, going forward, I think we continue to work together as a partner group and make sure we assess risks of all engagements to the best degree that we can with the information we have at the time. I would point again that when conducting this risk assessment in October of 21, with the information available at the time, I believe I stand by the decision we made to proceed at that given time. Given the new information that has come to light since then, I would suspect our decision would be different.
Thank you very much. Mr. Desjardins, you're up again for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bashir, when did you first meet with Christian Firth as a public servant?
Thank you for the question. I have an exact date for you. I can give you a rough guess of sometime in the years of 2017, 2018.
Are you not required to document when you meet with potential partners like this that are outside in the public or outside in the private service?
I think the level of documentation varies depending on the nature of the meeting. Like, a half-hour meeting with a vendor.
You said you met in the lobby of a government building. Did you report that?
That's correct. At the time, my management knew I was meeting with Christian Firth, yes.
And how did you report that to management?
I generally debriefed my leadership team on all vendor meetings, and as you know,
did you write it down?
I don't recall. It could have been an email. I don't have access to my email.
So you don't recall, you don't know when, but you know you met with them.
Yeah, like to the best of my knowledge, I don't have access to my old emails. But generally, if I could speak generally,
who did you report it to? Your leadership team. Who are the members of your leadership team? Who was your supervisor?
At that particular time, it probably would have been. Sorry, I've worked for a number of different. 2017, 2018, if memory serves, it would have been Mark Briard.
Is that when you met with Christian Firth? Was 2017, 2018, or when did you meet with Christian Firth?
That's to the best of my recollection is 2017, 2018. And the reason I say that,
you don't know the whole year.
Well, the reason I say that,
you have to know at least a month.
Yeah, and if you can allow me to answer, I know it was in relation to when we released our digital operations strategic plan. So in my head, I remember writing that in 2017. I just don't recall when it was published. And Mr. Firth would have contacted me after the publication of that digital operations strategic plan.
So we're supposed to just believe you, Mr. Bashir, that sometime between the course of 2017, 2018, you met with Christian Firth in a government precinct and you failed to disclose in writing, and you don't, and your mind seems to have failed you as well, even a month that you met with Christian Firth. Is that correct? Is that what you're telling us?
Well, thank you for the question. Respectfully, you're asking me about a meeting 7 years ago. I'm doing my best to recall. If the Treasury Board of Canada Secretary likely has access to my calendar, and I suggest that might be the fastest way to get the exact meeting invite.
I find it very difficult to believe that sometime in the 2 years of 2017, 2018, that it escapes your knowledge as to when you met with this person, and the fact that you failed to disclose it. Again, I'll ask you one more time. Did you disclose your meeting with Mr. Firth to anyone in writing?
Thank you for the member's question. So generally what would happen after those types of meetings is I would debrief my management team.
Yes or no, Mr. Bashir? It's an easy question.
Debriefs could occur in writing or in person for this particular meeting.
That is the time, digitally. You will have another slot. I'm going to turn now to Mr. Barrett for 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Bashir, when you worked at the Treasury Board, you went to this large Canadian company and accounting firm. But when you were with the Treasury Board, how many times did you hear stories of companies like KPMG being sent to work through to subcontract through two-person, no value-add firms? Because it's extraordinary. And I've talked to, at these tables, a lot of folks, and the two-person scenario is an outlier. So how many times did you hear about that?
Thanks for the question. I don't know the number of employees of every company for sure, but I would say it wasn't uncommon to see subcontracting relationships between companies of all sizes.
I mean, you met with 50% of the employees from this company in a government lobby. You mentioned that much. We know that they even were able to write their own contract. There seems to be all kinds of exceptions around this two-person company, GC Strategies. How many times has KPMG, to your knowledge, been allowed to write a contract and then be the beneficiary of that contract, to be the supplier?
I'm not aware of any times we write our own contracts. It's strictly forbidden.
It's forbidden, but it seems like, again, there's these exceptions with GC Strategies. Did you were a DG, you were Director General?
Correct.
Did you do a quick search to see if the individual you were meeting with, Mr. Firth, was registered to lobby before you met with him?
Thank you for the question. I don't recall the details of that meeting. I couldn't give you an exact answer.
What were you in the habit of meeting with lobbyists?
Thank you for the question. No, we're not permitted to meet with lobbyists.
Okay, so how do you if you didn't check to see if he was a lobbyist, how would you know whether or not you were meeting with someone you were allowed to meet with?
Oh, thanks for the question. I'm saying me personally, I don't know. My staff may have checked on my behalf as well.
I've got to tell you, absent more of the details, it just seems like you have a bit of a soft spot for Mr. Firth, and I don't know how he was able to get this access to you. I don't understand how you would be directed on behalf of KPMG to subcontract for this same guy who got this access to you, who was lobbying as an unregistered lobbyist. And your paths seem to cross, and you say, well, you know, it kind of all worked out, and it seems like it was okay. I think it's demonstrably not okay. This company has been engaged in all kinds of conduct that's not acceptable for any other vendor, and it's obviously not of value to Canadians the way that this was carried out. How many hours of programming or cybersecurity work did Christian Firth and GC Strategies do on the contract with KPMG for ArriveCan? Just how many hours?
On my specific contract, they were not involved on my delivery.
So they weren't involved.
In my delivery, I cannot speak to what Mr. Utano and Mr. Firth did afterwards, but specific to delivery of...
I gather that they probably went out for a steak and a beer. That seems to be the pattern here, is that they went out for dinners, collected 30% commissions, and then had someone else do the work and said, well, these guys are IT professionals, but they didn't do any IT work. How much exactly was KPMG paid through their subcontract with GC Strategies for the work on ArriveCan?
Thank you for the question. As I stated earlier, the two task authorizations total an amount of $400,000.
Do you know how much GC Strategies billed for that work?
I do not have visibility into that.
Well, we know that GC Strategies billed the government $452,000 for your work, and that's on the low end, which is a pretty good payday, $52,000 for doing no value-added work, and a senior government official facilitated it all. We know that you had that exploratory meeting with GC Strategies, Mr. Firth, and then were directed to work with GC Strategies. At what point did you leave the government to go become a consultant for KPMG or an employee of KPMG? What was the...
That happened in May of 2020.
May of 2020. Do you think it was appropriate and ethical for the government to have a senior CBSA official direct a business to work with a favored contractor, and I'm asserting that they're a favored contractor, like GC Strategies? Do you think it was appropriate and ethical?
I think the government of Canada can decide the way in which...
I'm asking you, sir, make a value judgment. On behalf of KPMG, is this the kind of company that KPMG does business with?
We would do business with any company that...
Do business with any company that's having their doors kicked in by the RCMP, that's obviously engaged in procurement processes that are illegal.
Very much. I will allow an answer, Mr. Barrett.
Do business with any company.
I'd like to complete the sentence. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to say, we would do business with any company that passes our risk management processes, as GC Strategies did at that time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bernard, in response to an earlier question from MP Khalid, you indicated that you were surprised to see your company listed in the AG's report. So given that you made $3 million on contract work with ArriveCan, why were you surprised that your company would be listed in the AG's report?
Well, first, we had no ArriveCan contracts. We had a call-up with the CBSA. It was a vehicle, and that vehicle was used. And I know the Auditor General says $3 million, so we immediately went and looked through all of our timesheets, and we were only able to identify $500,000.
Clarify for me a vehicle. So did you not do work on the ArriveCan app, or clarify what your work was?
In the federal government procurement, vehicles are brought up so that we have a number of vehicles. We all do. And I can talk to you from my side, because I was also in the government, and I had vehicles. Because oftentimes we needed to do some IT work, and it had to be done right away, And we didn't have the resources, so we'd go to these vehicles. We have such vehicles, we all do. And those vehicles, we had 3 of them. One of them was never used at all. And in 2 of them that were used, we identified at least $500,000 through the timesheets.
So now I would like to hear from each one of the companies represented here today. The CBSA indicated that contractors were selected because they helped to produce a faster result, build the app faster. Do you agree that Donnacona, Tech Systems, and KPMG helped to speed up the process? And from each of you, how? How did your involvement or participation do that? Who wants to start? It doesn't matter to me.
Thank you for the member's question. Just to clarify, our work at KPMG was a cybersecurity assessment post development of the application itself. So I can't really comment on how it sped up the development of the app. I can comment on the fact that we did help identify areas for improvement to enhance the security of the application for the benefit of Canadian citizens that used it.
As we previously mentioned, we think from the timesheets, the work that was done, and our team was building infrastructure on the AWS cloud to accept data and provide business intelligence reports back. But it was not only from public health, but with many other applications that were providing data into this infrastructure. So we were building this infrastructure on the AWS cloud. I don't know if it helped speed up the app. I have no idea, but we were creating the infrastructure for a number of different applications.
We're not talking about speeding up the app. We're talking about speeding up the process of developing the app.
You had to build something on the cloud. It's in the cloud, so yeah, it would help.
Okay, and Mr. Loshman, how about your company?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned in our opening statement, we bid on and won 2 contracts with CBSA that went through a competitive process in which we were selected because of our value to the Crown. So yes, I think we delivered value to CBSA.
Now, for each one of the companies, is there any new information or anything else that you would like to add or clarify during your testimony today? Because we'll be wrapping up soon. So is there anything that...
I guess I would just say that we've already said it, that all of our contracts are competitively procured through the RFP process. There was no sole source or anything, and they were all the RFP process, and we were successful in winning them through a very, very competitive process. These processes are very competitive.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Lee?
Thank you for the member's question. I just want to add that on behalf of KPMG, we're really proud of the work that we did to support both the Public Health Agency of Canada and CBSA during the COVID-19 pandemic with at the time, circumstances that for both agencies were incredibly stressful, and at all times we followed the government's preferred procurement process, and we did not influence that procurement process. We abided by it at their request. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, and how much time do I have left?
About 20 seconds.
Okay, did you have anything that you would like to add?
The question, no additional clarifications at this time.
Okay, I'll see. Bye.
Thank you very much. Beginning our 4th and final round, Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, Mr. Bashir, I'm still going to be circling back on your relationship with GC Strategies and Christian Firth. Your evidence is somewhat clear, 3 to 4 possible meetings with Mr. Firth before you engaged with him pursuant to direction given by Mr. Utano. Did any of those meetings occur at his place of business?
No, sir, they did not.
Okay. All at the government offices?
All in the lobby of 90 Elgin, from what I recall, yes.
Were you familiar with where he conducted his business?
I did not have any line of sight into that.
He probably didn't tell you he operated out of his basement, did he?
I did not have any line of sight into that either.
No, he didn't offer that.
That's correct.
Didn't tell you where he worked out of? Did he give you a business card at least?
It's possible. I don't recall, but I don't recall the basement conversation coming up.
Okay, so help me with this because I have a hard time reconciling the evidence that your partner, Mr. Hartaj Najir, gave on the last occasion and your evidence today with respect to a very key issue. And my colleague, Mr. Nader, had basically used a phrase called flim-flammed. You weren't familiar with that phrase. It could be hoodwinked. It could be snowed. It could be lied to. You certainly didn't know, is what I understand, you didn't know that they offered no IT services whatsoever. They were strictly a middleman, connecting the government of Canada with professionals. You're saying you didn't know that, and Mr. Firth didn't volunteer that information. That's what you're telling us today, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so here's the problem. Your partner, Mr. Najir, on the last occasion at committee said the following. The firm, KPMG, followed rigorous processes and determined no adverse considerations in contracting with GC Strategies, given that they were a well-known entity in the government sector. Both versions cannot be true at the same time. What were those rigorous processes that determined there were no adverse considerations? Did you at least do an address check?
Thank you for the question. I don't know the detail, and I'll ask Ms. Lee after this to provide whatever details you can about our acceptance processes as that is executed by another team. But my understanding is that they look into a variety of factors, including the board of directors or C-suite, any kind of
board of directors. It was a partnership. It wasn't a corporation. So let's move on to the other checks.
Thank you. My understanding is they look for, any public lawsuits or adverse media attention, things of that nature. But Ms. Lee, please, if I'm missing anything in our...
That's right. That's correct.
And at that given time, given that these are, point-in-time assessments, nothing of concern was raised?
A leading multinational consulting firm exercises the bare minimum of due diligence to determine that you are legitimately dealing with an IT company that lied to you. Don't you recognize the problems inherent with what you just stated to me? Don't you think you need to revamp your investigative measures to determine who you're actually dealing with?
Thank you for the member's question, and if I may, Mr. Chair, I just want to comment on the testimony from Hartaj last time we were here. He was referring to the client engagement and the engagement acceptance process that we go through for every single project that we do, which is and if I may,
Ms. Lee, that's fine. This is my time. I have some other questions to ask of you. So, Mr. Utano asked you to deal specifically with GC Strategies in the virtual meeting that you had with him, correct? Okay. Did he say why?
At that time, my understanding was that he was exploring a variety of procurement options as likely direct.
He didn't give you any other government, he didn't give you any other companies to deal with. He didn't say you can deal with GC or you can deal with Dalian or you can deal with Coridex. You choose. He just said, I want you to work with GC, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So at the time, we were exploring either, like I said, going out to RFP, full RFP, using the SEPS vehicle, or GC Strategies were the three options.
And that's the first time that you had ever, working with the government of Canada, you had ever worked with a contractor that wasn't directly the government of Canada. Isn't that fair to say?
Me personally, that was my first time, but as our written response stated, our firm has subcontracted in the past with approximately 13 companies.
Thank you. That is your time. There's turning now to Ms. Shanahan. The floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And again, I'd like to thank the witnesses for appearing here today, and I regret the accusatory nature of some of the questions that you have been subjected to here today, and I also apologize for you having been subjected to some housekeeping that I did earlier. But I firmly believe that members of Parliament should be held to the same standard that they expect contractors, that they expect employees, that they expect the public to be held to, that have dealings with taxpayer money, and so that was the nature of my interventions earlier, but we can see that that was shut down for today, but may be revisited at another time. In the meantime, I would like to ask you about the Auditor General's report. So, were you, and I think someone did answer this, were you contacted by the Auditor General's office during the writing of the report, Ms. Lee?
Yes, thank you for the member's question. We were, so KPMG was contacted, I think a week in advance of the publication of the Auditor's General report to just to confirm some of the facts that were documented in the report. And as I said before, and I'll say it again, we read the report, we understood all the findings, and we cooperated fully.
Very good. So you were able to confirm the facts. So when the report actually was issued, did you learn anything? Was there anything in that report that you were not aware of concerning KPMG?
Thank you for the member's question. The only thing that we learned was when she documented that there was no documentation. I believe it was, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was to the effect of that there was no documentation or rationale provided by the Public Health Agency for the direct award to KPMG after the original SEPS contracting. And to our understanding, the Public Health Agency did actually speak with their internal procurement folks to provide that rationale. We were not given access to any of that documentation or were part of any of those conversations. But that was the only thing that stood out for us that was different than what we understood to have happened.
Okay, so you were not contacted after the report came out about any follow-up or providing of any
we were not, and that's correct.
Documents. All right, and so the same question then to Donnacona, Mr. Dadal. Were you contacted by the Auditor General's report prior to the report coming out?
Yes, prior to the release of the report, we received a very brief email stating that they were going to, the report would show that we did $3 million of services work on ArriveCan. We responded back after we had gone through our timesheets and said, from our records, we believe that number is probably in the range of 500,000. And we reported that back, and we didn't hear anything after that. And we had no other contact after that with the AG.
So once the report was released, is that when you learned that the 3 million numbers was still there?
Yes.
Yes. All
yes.
right. And have you had any contact now subsequent?
No, none.
All right. Thank you very much. And Mr. Lashman for.
Thank you for the question. Yes, we were contacted by the Auditor General prior to the release of the report. We cooperated with her investigation and have not heard back from the office since.
Was there anything in the report that was new to you that you learned once the report was published?
Thank you for the question. We've read the report and we agree with what's in the report.
All right, very good. I'm now. Have any of you been contacted by the RC? If you are contacted by the RCMP, will you cooperate with ongoing investigations into the ArriveCan application?
Question, and just to be clear, for the ArriveCan work that we've done, we have not been contacted by the RCMP, but of course, if we were, we would comply and we would cooperate fully. But we have not been.
Excellent. Same question.
We've not been contacted by the RCMP, and obviously, if we were, we would.
All right, and same question here.
Thank you for the question. We have not been contacted by the RCMP, but we would cooperate with the investigation.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the work that you did in public service, and I have no further questions.
Thank you very much. Suivant, c'est Madame Sinclair-Desgagnés, encore une fois.
Ms. Sinclair-Desgagnés, two numbers. Mr. Lashman, you were saying that you will cooperate with any study by the RCMP. What do you have to say with regard to the current inquiry? Do you have anything else that you wish to share with us?
Thank you for the question. We haven't been contacted by the RCMP in regards to CBSA or ArriveCan, so no further comment.
Donc, vous n'avez absolument rien comme...
So you have nothing from your experience with them. There's nothing else. We've heard references to systemic corruption within CBSA. So you saw nothing with regard to CBSA?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. No, we have not been contacted by the RCMP.
Parfait. Merci. Je vais passer...
Now, a question for Donnacona. Coming back to the fact that you said that there were accusations and that changed your life, and in 2021, I think that there were 21 non-competitive contracts with CBSA. 23 in 2021, non-competitive by CBSA. How can you explain this such a large number of contracts, non-competitive, 1 year only with one company?
Sorry, who with the non-competitive? We didn't have any non-competitive contracts.
D'après le site du gouvernement même, vous avez reçu 21 contrats de manière non concurrentielle. Avec le gouvernement, avec l'agence.
You had this was under the open government's source. Do you confirm that?
Sir, could you repeat the question? My understanding is you're saying we had some 20-odd non-competitive contracts awarded?
C'est les chiffres du gouvernement, Monsieur Dowdall.
These are government figures.
We don't have any non-competitive. We can't validate that information.
D'accord, donc vous contestez les chiffres.
So you're questioning the information from the open government site itself. Strange. And you've never had non-competitive contracts with the Government of Canada?
The only ones we would have had would have been possible sole sources under 40,000. That's the only thing we've had. Everything else we've competed in a typical RFP process.
Une dernière question, s'il vous plaît. Ça marche. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
C'est Mr. Desjardins. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Did KPMG employees who worked on ArriveCan receive a valid security clearance?
The member's question. I'll comment on the public health agency related work. All of the employees who worked, or all of the staff who worked on the ArriveCan program, yes, for public health agents, we had all the proper security clearance. We required reliability for that contract, for those contracts. And then,
at which level did they receive?
So for the public health agency work, we were required to have reliability security clearance, and all of our resources had that reliability or higher. I myself have security at secret clearance.
And if I could kindly, if you don't mind me adding, for the cybersecurity assessment work, just to reiterate what I said earlier, I had a mix of some secret cleared people who were doing more of the hands-on work with the rest of the staff at the reliability level.
Did KPMG at any time share the results of the security vulnerability assessment with GC Strategies?
No.
In any capacity, sharing of reports, potential vulnerabilities found in the assessment, incident response plans, and any information, even if it was meeting in a lobby, Mr. Bashir?
Thank you for the member's question. All of our results were shared directly with the CBSA, but I can't speak to who they shared them with after that.
Now, moving on to intellectual property. Does KPMG consider any algorithm it produces for the government, in particular ArriveCan, their intellectual property?
So thank you for the member's question. I'll just clarify that for the public health agency related work, we did not develop any algorithms for that work.
And similarly, when you say algorithm, I just want to clarify that KPMG didn't create or edit any code for the ArriveCan app. Our work was more assessment after the code was developed to confirm that the code complied with Government of Canada security standards and policies.
I understand. And the same question regarding security clearances for Tech and Donnacona. Did you receive security clearances? For all those employees that worked on the ArriveCan app?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we validate the security clearance of all of the professionals we place with the government.
Unless it's very short, Mr.
Donnacona, the security
Oh,
clearance.
pardon me. The answer to that was also,
Clearances, we would have security clearances for everybody. Yep.
and thank you. That is
Auditor
your time.
General.
That
Sure,
is,
thank you,
that
sir.
is your time. Mr. Nader, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And it's too bad that the Liberal National Caucus Chair doesn't like our questions, but unfortunately, the government failed, and we have to ask questions on behalf of Canadians so that taxpayer money is properly spent. Mr. Bashir, you mentioned that you would have briefed your leadership team on your meetings with GC Strategies. Who were the members that you would have briefed on those meetings?
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned earlier, given the time frame, it likely would have been Mark Briard.
So you said leadership team. Was it more than one person or just Mr. Brouillard?
Well, he was my assistant deputy minister at the time. There were a number of other director generals that may have been present, but generally the debrief would have been back like upwards to the assistant deputy minister, yes.
Would that have been oral brief or would there have been written documentation?
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned earlier, generally the debriefs, they varied. Sometimes if there was substance, there would be in writing. Sometimes it was a conversation during a bilateral meeting in person.
Well, given that Mr. Brouillard was the Chief Technology Officer of Canada, do you not think he might have had some line of sight onto a company like GC Strategies, which supposedly was a IT technology company?
Thank you for the question. I can't speak to Mr. Briard's line of sight into the companies that he knows.
I'll ask you that then. Did he offer any concerns about GC Strategies?
Thank you for the question. At that time, no concerns were raised.
So Mr. Brouillard was the Chief Technology Officer of Canada. Who currently holds that position?
Thank you for the question. I don't actually. I think last I heard it was Min Doan, but I believe he's on leave of absence, so I'm not sure who is acting in the role at the moment.
Min Doan, that name rings a bell with this committee. Have you ever met with Min Doan?
Thank you for the question. Certainly in government context, we were on the same committee, I believe, the Enterprise Architecture Review Board. So we sat, across the table from one another in a format similar to this, but didn't really work with them too closely.
Did you ever have any conversations with Min Doan after leaving government?
After leaving, thank you for the question. The only time was likely during the presentation of our findings of the CBSA cybersecurity assessment that we conducted. I remember presenting those findings to a CBSA committee, and I believe that Mr. Doan was present at that meeting.
Do you have any records from that meeting?
Thank you for the question. At best, probably a meeting invite. I can't, but I'd have to get back to you on that.
Who else do you recall having been at that meeting with Mr. Doan?
Certainly, Mr. Utano would have been present. Likely some of his team members as well, and other members. It was a steering committee, as I recall, a CBSA steering committee. So I don't know all the names off the top of my head, but I suggest that it would likely be a series of IT leaders, if I can characterize it that way.
Could you get back to us if you have any documentation of who would have been at that
Certainly,
meeting?
I'll take that back and get back to whatever I can.
Does KPMG, or you specifically in your role, have any dealings with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans?
Thank you for the question. So first, me personally, no, I've not had any dealings with Department of Fishery and Oceans. I can't speak on behalf of the entire firm. I could take that back and get back to you, but to my knowledge, I don't know of any. But Ms. Lee, I don't know if
Same answer. I'm not aware.
And what about Treasury Board Secretariat?
Thank you for that question as well. I recently completed a small engagement with the Office of the Comptroller General in the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, where it was a roughly $30,000 engagement to provide security advice and guidance on a horizontal audit of IT security. That was the last engagement I had signed with the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat.
Did you have any previous dealings with those individuals at the Comptroller General's office while you were a public servant?
Thank you for the question. When it comes to dealings, not like I didn't work with them on a regular basis. I certainly would have passed by them in the hall and said hello, but no, we didn't have any work, regularly. It could be given that I was in the office of the Chief Information Officer, and they were in a completely separate branch.
So I only have a few seconds left, but I want to go back. You mentioned that you would have briefed your employer, your manager, but you don't know how you did it. Could you commit in review to come back to this committee with a confirmation of how you would have briefed your manager and who you would have briefed, whether it was Mr. Brouillard or whether it was others as well, and any documentation? Can you provide that to this committee of how you briefed your supervisors following your meetings with GC Strategies?
I'll certainly do what I can. I hope the committee understands and respects. I don't have access to my former inbox at Treasury Board, so I couldn't provide the records themselves. But I can certainly do my best to summarize what I recall.
Thank you. If you could do that, and if you're even a response, if you get a response, great. And if you find the department does not allow you access to your records, we will take that in consideration as well. Thank you. Ms. Shipp, you have the last 5-minute round turn. It's over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sorry to hear that Mr. Nader is not interested in looking in the misuse of public funds when it's their own members doing it. Mr. Bernard, how long have you been doing business with the Government of Canada?
Since, you mean after I resigned? Since 1990.
Okay. And how large were these contracts relatively to the work that your organization has normally done?
Well, it started off small and it just grew over time as we grew.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And I'll ask the same question to yourself.
Thank you for the question. You're asking, just for clarification.
How long has
Tech Systems
been doing business with the Government of Canada?
Thank you for the question. Tech Systems has been working with the federal government since about 2015. Since 2015, sorry.
And how large were these contracts relative to the work that you normally do?
Thank you for the question. The contracts vary in size, but we have several different contracts with the federal government of multiple values. So some values are, say, $300,000, but we do have our agreements with CBSA, for example, were $15 and $7 million respectively.
Okay. All right. Ms. Lee, did you want to finish your answer? I believe Mr. Brock was asking a question and you weren't given an opportunity to finish your answer. Do you still want to answer that?
Thank you very much for allowing me to finish my comment. I was simply trying to say before, in response to Mr. Brock's question, that I think it was to do with the processes around how we review whether or not we can engage in work with a particular organization or a contractor or a subcontractor. So I was just trying to simply finish the statement that we do have these processes where we check clients, we check the nature of the engagement that we're being asked to undertake. And we have 3 partners for all of our public sector engagements. We have 3 partners that actually have to sign off on something before we're allowed to proceed. The engagement lead partner, a secondary partner that would be responsible for looking after the engagement specific process questions, and then another engagement another quality partner. So I wanted to simply say that our processes are incredibly rigorous. They're very detailed. They are reliant on point in time information, and our systems continuously update based on current information as things evolve. So that's what I wanted to finish. Thank you.
Okay. So do you believe that your company gave good value for the work that was done?
Again, for the member's question, as I said before, we are very proud of the work that we did, both through the Public Health Agency as well as the CBSA work that we fulfilled for the government during this incredibly stressful time during the pandemic. And we do believe that the work that we did fulfilled roles that the government themselves could not do in the time constraints that were required. And so, yes, I do think that we added tremendous value for the work that we provided for the Government of Canada.
Mr. Bashir, looking back on everything that's happened, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Thank you for the question. I echo my colleagues' comments and how proud we are of doing that job. If the CBSA required cybersecurity assistance to ensure the continuing protection of Canadians' information, that is right up our alley, and we would do that type of work again. I think going back to what Ms. Lee said, I wouldn't have done anything differently in the sense that we went through the processes we were supposed to go through. The Government of Canada had repeatedly validated GC Strategies themselves as a vendor of choice, of record, and awarded, I believe, 100 plus contracts since 2015. So given that information, no differences to my answer. I think knowing what we know today, and knowing that some adverse information has come up with regards to that company, I don't suspect we do work with them going forward. However, I want to echo again that if a Government of Canada organization required cybersecurity support, we would be there, absolutely.
How much time do we have?
About 5 seconds, so a very quick question.
Okay. Anything either of you would do differently?
And that is it. Anything else
Well,
you'd like to add?
Anything else?
Thank you.
No. Very good. Thank you. Order, please. I want to thank the witnesses for coming in today. We're ending a little late, but not too bad, and coming in for your testimony and participation in relation to the study of ArriveCAN. Any documents or information that's been requested, you can submit that to the clerk. Members, before we adjourn, the panel schedule for Thursday will be switched. We can expect Minister Hajdu for the first hour and Minister Blair in the second hour. This is at their request, and I am inclined to grant that change. And lastly, the subcommittee will be meeting Monday at 3:30 p.m. for an Canada discussion. On that, I adjourn this meeting. Have a good weekend. See some of you Monday.